So good afternoon. The title of this, that's me, yeah. I'll go to the next slide. The title of this conference is Outlook, and for this Outlook, I really wanted to keep it a bit positive because I think for the first time in a long time, we actually can keep it positive and have a whole presentation about that, so that's good news. And also really focus on three themes that I've seen really emerge and be an important part of the recovery of the auto industry, which are transformation, diversification, and personalization. There's probably a lot more that we can focus on here today, but I only have 15 minutes, so I can't cover everything and be up here for 5 hours. The first real theme is transformation, and I call these butterflies 2010 to 2014. 2009 doesn't get a butterfly because probably most of you are around. It was kind of bad. Not a lot to be really excited about. But there's been, luckily, a lot of transformation since that point, and even if 2014 isn't a total butterfly, I think we're getting closer to that point. We've all been following the sales story. We all pretty much aware that the early 2000s were a good time for car sales. Then 2008 and 2009 happened, and we were pretty much at the bottom. And since then, there's been a lot of good, steady recovery. And 2013 finished at 15.6 million units, and I think it's important because it's a healthy 15.6 million units, not like before in the past where sales were perhaps a bit propped up by incentives and a lot of inventory. And I mentioned health because really I've seen a lot of beauty in flat lines, and if you're in the hospital, this is probably really bad to see a flat line, especially if it's you. But I think some of the key metrics that I've been looking at recently and what I focus on, I've seen some really encouraging news. The first is days to turn, and this measures how long a car sits on a dealership's lot before it's actually sold to the consumer. And if it's there for a long time, it's not good news, because either the car is not really great or there's no customers coming to the dealership to buy it. But in the past 12 months, we've seen it really steady and not fluctuate so much, because you don't want it to be high and then to low, because that just shows you that some really negative things are going on in the marketplace. But the past year, I'd say it hasn't fluctuated more than 4 days on average from month to month, which I find pretty encouraging. And also what's also been kind of steadying is incentives, and these are mainstream incentives, and what this chart looks at is the discount from transaction price. It was going in a lot of places for a long time, and crazy things were happening. If you followed the news, I'm sure you saw things like buy one large truck, get a car free, all sorts of crazy things in the mainstream incentive world, but it seems like a lot of that has really calmed down, and we've seen a real flattening of incentives. And again, these are more mainstream incentives of cash and finance. So there's not so much inquiry in terms of what's happening for the consumer. And sales actually, I don't have this chart on this, but sales actually have been relatively steady as well. They've continued to climb, but I think that you're not seeing as much fluctuation month to month, which really suggests responsible buying patterns. The second key theme I wanted to focus on is diversification, because there's beauty in having different things on offer, and we talked earlier about CES becoming a lot like an auto show, and I think that that's true. I mean, it almost is like an auto show. So many cool, interesting things for people to look at and to get excited about. Over the course of the past 10 years, we've seen a big growth in the number of cars that are available in the marketplace. More cars, interestingly, and less brands. I'm sure this time 10 years ago there was quite a few more brands than there are today, but we're seeing more cars. And what we're seeing are also lineups being more complete by all of the automakers. So they're having everything from small cars to large cars. And I find that encouraging, because if you recall back in 2008 for that really nasty gas spike that we saw in the spring when gas prices went pretty crazy. I know in Los Angeles I paid almost $5 a gallon, but we saw all sorts of, weird, really negative things happen. We saw a lot of people trading in their large SUVs for small cars, and we're a website, so we see immediately, what's happening to the consumer psyche, and it was not a lot of good things. A lot of negative equity at that time, and a lot of people making purchase decisions solely based on fuel efficiency and not really their lifestyle. And since then, I feel like the automakers themselves have had more complete lineups. And if you look at domestics, which were, really criticized during this time for not having fuel-efficient vehicles, a lot of that has changed. And if you look at this chart of domestic retail market share growth from 2010 to 2013, you'll see that domestic retail market share has grown in many places, basically everything but the red states. And what's encouraging is that they are growing in non-traditional markets that are domestic, like California and New York. New York and Los Angeles are the two largest markets in the United States. So if you're going to make it someplace, you're going to make it there to really move the needle for your brand. And another trend that I have seen that really has showed a diversification of the market is, luxury and mainstream almost becoming, more synced. Mainstream prices for the industry have gone up. I think we've all probably read that story. Last month, raw transaction prices were nearly $33,000, and that's a lot of money. But the relationship to luxury brand prices to the overall industry has changed. At one point, 10 years ago, Mercedes average transaction prices were probably double that of the industry, but the relationship has definitely decreased over time, with luxury brands having more entry-level product and the mainstream brands having more content and moving upstream. So it's really interesting how I think you're seeing more of a meeting between luxury and mainstream, which gives you a lot of options, and kind of shows that there's no rules out there. I mean, there's a lot of different things that work. In fact, I was just looking at some product out there, and I was looking at the Fusion, which is a nice car, and optioning now you can get to $40,000, which was surprising me, because I think that it starts probably about $22,000, somewhere around that ballpark. But $40,000, you're pretty much at BMW territory. And what I think is significant about that is, if somebody has $40,000 to spend, the types of cars that they can buy, that list is a lot longer. And customers now have the choice to choose if they want something really well contented, or they want to go with a prestige brand. And that kind of ties into the third trend that I wanted to talk about, which is personalization. Because everybody wants to be unique. You don't want to just blend in with the crowd, and you want your car to be essentially an extension of yourself. And it's not always nice when you see everybody else on the block has the same car as you. And I think sometimes as analysts, I know I do, that I forget that car buying is a really emotional process for a lot of people. Like, I sit behind my computer most days and looking at Excel spreadsheets, probably like a lot of you people do. And you forget that, car buying is supposed to be fun, and people love their cars. And when you talk to someone who just bought a new car after it's been a while, I mean, they are seriously delighted. And you're kind of like, yeah, okay, that's great. You got a, compact car, good for you. But I mean, they want to tell you about the features and everything. And what I think is good out there in the marketplace now is that there's so many different niches. I mean, you want a convertible SUV, you got that. If you want a subcompact SUV, you got that. You want an electric car, you want a plug-in hybrid, you want all-wheel drive, front-wheel drive. There's so many more choices. And I think that really allows people to connect with their car purchase. And I think it creates joy in the process, which, the process has been a bit criticized in the past, of people saying it's not exactly the most pleasant thing. And also, besides cars, there's so many new features that I think people can connect with. I mean, nowadays it's not unusual for you to be able to download your own photo and show it up in the monitor in your car. And I don't know what kind of photo you would want to put there, but I'm sure that for a lot of people, you can kind of use that as a really way to express yourself and your identity. And I think what's great about a lot of these features is that they're new, and the average age of a vehicle being traded in right now is 6 years old. So you think about 6 years ago, a lot of these things didn't exist, and I think a lot of them build equity and are very, are great things to have for the consumer. The other way I think that people are really connecting with their car is really through the process. I think a lot of people nowadays are connecting with the deal. I kind of call it competitive consumerism out there, and I mean, I know I've been guilty of it where, I do a lot of internet research and then I get a really good deal on something and I get really excited, and then I brag to people like, oh yeah, I got that for, blah, 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 and I did so well. And I think for a lot of people that is something that they do, and I can tell that that's happening in the auto market, because if you look back over the course of the past 10 to even 20 years, I only have 2006 to 2012 on this chart, otherwise it becomes a bit of a bear. But December was actually not really a remarkable month for a long time. It was, kind of mid-pack, maybe 6th or 7th in terms of total sales by month. But in the past 4 years, it's really improved a lot. And this chart shows that the blue actually is first place, if you couldn't tell. The red is second place, and yellow is third place. But since 2009, December has been either the first or second best month of the year. And I think a lot of that comes from the perception that people, think that they're going to get a great deal in this period. It's not always the case, because I think, as we saw, incentives have been relatively steady, but there is that perception out there. And I think that if you think you get a good deal, you feel a lot better about the process, and you may do it again sooner. You may encourage other people to do so, especially, I think, when you get a good deal, you tell other people like, oh, now is the time, you got to do that. And I think that it has been something that's been very apparent in the auto industry for the past few years. But that process can be challenged, and I think what we saw this year for Black Friday was that it was sort of a dud. I think that the sales, in terms of what the retail market did out there, it wasn't that impressive. And I think a big portion of that is that nowadays, it seemed like this year in particular, that Black Friday pretty much ran from Thanksgiving to right before Christmas. So there was no longer that finite period of time where you knew that you can go and get your big screen TV for $200 or whatever it may be, that you pretty much could get the same deal on December 23rd or December 13th as you could have on Black Friday, and you don't have to get trampled in the process of all these crazy people out there trying to get good deals as well.